Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel for our second day. Today, we're going to be talking about kind of tips and strategies for putting metadata to work. If we haven't met before, I'm Maggie Hays. I'm the founding community product manager for DataHub, part of the founding team at Acryl Data. And today I'm joined by some amazing folks from our DataHub community. So Matthew, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Matthew. I'm working in London for checkout.com as a data engineer.
And Nedra?
Hi, my name's Nedra Albrecht. I work at Slack. I've been there about 3.5 years. I'm based out of Seattle, but Salesforce is based out of San Francisco.
And Harvey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Harvey, an engineering manager at Grab, and I'm based in Singapore.
So we are all over this world. Also, thanks for joining at all hours of the day. And I forgot to mention, I'm based out of Chicago. All right, so we have a ton of great conversation points to get through today, but let's kind of set the stage a little bit. So if you guys could kind of give us a sense of within your organization, what's kind of the crux of your metadata strategy? What kind of drove you to start looking into building a metadata strategy? Kind of the systems in play, et cetera. So Harvey, I'll actually start with you.
Sure. So metadata management is a problem that any data-driven organization needs to tackle at some point. And for us at Grab, we were fortunate to start early. We introduced an enterprise data catalog years ago to reap the benefits of data discovery. And that is to break data silos and make data easily discoverable for anyone that needs data. However, with the incredible growth of our data scale, more and more use cases surface. And we saw increasing needs to have a metadata management solution that not only provides off-the-shelf features, but more importantly, offers the building blocks for us to fine-tune and to tailor for our use cases. So we evaluated a few open source solutions in the industry back in 2021 and found that DataHub, which is event-driven architecture, is best suited for our needs. So our journey with DataHub began. And we start with tidying up data lineage, which I believe is one of the first metadata challenges an organization will face alongside data ownership. Over time, we've expanded the scope of metadata we capture, and broadly, I've categorized it into 3 types: technical metadata, behavioral metadata, and business metadata. Technical and behavioral metadata are relatively easier to capture using connectors to source systems. And with the rise of generative AI, we've elevated our approach to capturing business metadata as well. For example, we use Gen AI to help us generate table documentation. So overall, I would say it's been an exciting and rewarding journey for us.
Amazing. That's so cool. I think if I remember correctly, I think the Grab team was one of the first orgs within the DataHub community that started really talking publicly about how you started building out Gen AI on top of your kind of metadata graph, which is just, it's so exciting. Nedra, how about you? What's kind of the base, or the rundown of the metadata strategy at Slack?
Yeah, so I feel like we share a lot of similarities with both Harvey and Matthew. We initially started trying to just consolidate our metadata from Hive and Airflow, create a lineage graph that we had been unsuccessful to create beforehand. And since then, we've kind of built upon that to create, like, in a variety of ways. Like, one of the ways that we're doing is we're using it to drive organizational level metrics to measure how our org is performing and where we can distribute resources or try to improve our experiences as data engineers. We're using it to power various applications across the organization for, like, ownership, cost showbacks, if we want to know how things cost. And then we also are really committed to just increasing that metadata quality and coverage beyond just the data warehouse perspective, but from end to end, from when a SDE lays down that event in code to where it pops up as a metric. Any person can find that data at any point in time. So that's really kind of where we're headed. And we've already laid that foundational work.
Amazing. Matthew, what's going on at checkout?
Yeah. On top of kind of the discoverability stuff, which was definitely a big issue for us that Nedra and Harvey were talking about, one of the big issues we had is we had lots of data in checkout and it was being used well. Like we had lots of use cases for it. It's used in our products. It was used for reporting to auditors and stuff like that. But the producers, the people who know the data best, didn't really have the tools to do a good job at making that data available. So they would ask at first for, can you provide this data? And they'd say, sure, I'll do it. But we didn't really have tools for them to see who's using it, who has access to it, what happens if I make this change? Is it going to break our consumers?
Yeah.
And that was one of the really big use cases that we wanted to bring a metadata management on after maybe one too many incident at 3 a.m. trying to make the schema change. I'm sure everyone here can relate to that.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it solved a lot of problem for us on that, on kind of giving the data owners tools to do a good job.
That's amazing. Yeah, the breaking changes at 2 a.m. That's always a fun one. I gotta say. So kind of thinking through, obviously there's a lot of kind of problems to solve in that space, and it can be very daunting, right? I know that kind of early in my own experience with metadata management, back when I was tech lead at a company called Braintree, it felt so daunting. I felt like I had this like mental map of the complexity of our data stack and all of the problems there within. So how do you even start, right? Like, what do you start? Like, how do you go from zero to something? So I'm curious, kind of along, kind of in the early stages of your implementation or kind of your discovery journey, what were some of the quick wins? Like, what were things that you kind of saw value more quickly than you maybe had anticipated? And Nedra, I'll start with you there.
Yeah. So our quickest win was actually trying to get people to understand the power of metadata. So one of the problems that all of us have tried to solve is the lineage problem, right?
Yeah.
Slack had tried that multiple times. And really being able to say, hey, we can actually overcome that issue was one of the main quick first wins that we had. People often are like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, or oh, I didn't know we had this data. And just being able to like expose them to that was such a huge thing for our company. It's really changed how we do our redaction stories, how we do our deprecation stories. So that was probably our quickest win, but we continue to have wins every quarter.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw a lineage graph, it was like DBT had just come out, and I saw, they like had the first version of their doc site and with lineage mapped into it. And it was like, oh my God, this is what I've just been whiteboarding these connections again and again and again, and people don't get it. And so just to have something that automatically kind of spits out that visualization is so powerful. It's so powerful. Harvey, what about with the Grab team? Were there any kind of quick wins up front?
Yeah, yeah, there were plenty of quick wins, though I'd say they require a bit more than just quick efforts to achieve. So first, we actually resolved the spaghetti-like mess of data lineage.
Yeah.
Right? It's like what Nandra had mentioned for her company as well. So I think that was essential for us because we actually manage tens of thousands of data sets in our data lake. And we also improve a lot on the coverage and accuracy of data ownership. When someone left the organization, we could actually automatically identify the next best owner. And we also use LLM to automatically tag PII data, which greatly improve our data access control and governance. And this year, we introduced a suite of AI-driven features like dataset suggestions based on use cases, and also automatic generation of column description and table documentation, just to name a few. And by the way, we've published quite some of all these developments in our Grab's tech blogs, so feel free to check them out if you are interested.
Yeah, we'll be sure to add those links in chat. It's been amazing to see how what you all built out. It's been incredible. Matthew, on the checkout.com site, is anything that kind of stood out to you in the early days that was maybe a little bit easier, quicker, kind of like that aha moment faster than you had anticipated?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the lineage again, although that's great. Like that's really,
it's
really
a big deal.
But kind of pairing the lineage with having really accurate ownership documentation. So that was kind of the first thing we did when we had DataHub up and running, was figuring out who actually is in charge of all this stuff, which kind of made dealing with those 3 a.m. incidents a lot easier, because you could say, okay, we have a problem with this report to auditors, and they're going to give us a huge fine if we don't fix this by 10 a.m. or something. Before, we wouldn't know who managed the source data. So now we could look at the report, kind of trace it back through the lineage, and then figure out, okay, who do I have to contact? Who do I have to call?
Yeah.
So that was a huge
I'm
one.
curious. Oh, sorry to interrupt. I'm curious on the ownership bit. How much of that was kind of programmatic versus manual attribution?
So we kind of had the stuff shifting left, so people could publish it in their code, but it was kind of chasing people to say, can you actually do this now? This is why we're doing it. So that you kind of need someone who that's their job, is like either very enthusiastic, like this is important, it's a big deal, let's do it. And since that, it only took us about like 2 months to kind of document. We had probably about 1,000 sources, and we were able to get them also documented in 2 or 3 months.
At Slack, we have about the same. And what we've done is like use CI/CD to enforce it. So right now they're getting a warning saying, hey, you need to add an owner. Eventually we'll flip that and they won't be able to push to prod at all without having columns specified.
That's amazing. That's the dream right there, Nedra. Amazing. So I think Matthew, I'll stay with you on this one. So kind of, and maybe it's part of that initial that initiative or not, but what were some of the challenges that you faced that maybe made you start second guess a little bit, like how do we actually get from cool, we have a lineage graph and now we've solved a problem, right? Like what are some of, or maybe it's not the lineage graph, but what are some of the kind of challenges you face that that, I don't know, you just were a little bit more difficult to navigate than you anticipated?
Yeah, I guess it took us a while to get, once we had all the ownership and we kind of solved some quick initial problems, then the kind of next step for us is, what do we actually want them to do with now that they own it? Like, what are their responsibilities really? Like, we had kind of abstract ideas of, yeah, we want them to manage access, we want them to deal with incidents, but we didn't have kind of clear steps and tools to give them to say, okay, this is how you deprecate an asset. This is the process you need to follow. This is how you grant access to an asset. This is how you should publish it. This is how you should evolve your schema. And it took us probably about a year, really, to kind of figure all that stuff out and say, like, these are the tools. This is the right way to do it. If you don't do it this way, we kind of don't support you anymore. That was kind of, that took a while to figure out.
What were some of the kind of strategies to establish, or like to kind of get to those processes, right? Because you could I know that one big mistake that I made in my kind of early days on a centralized team was just assuming that if I set standards, people will just follow them, right? Or if I just say like, hey, it's a good idea for us to document the things that we create, that should be obvious to everyone, right? And one of the moments that will forever, it's just like so deeply ingrained in my mind, was I stood in front of all the tech leads within engineering, and I said, hey, I created this Google sheet with all of the tables and columns that your team owns. I just need you to document them. And they laughed at me. Like they laughed because they're like, why would we go into Google Sheets when the code is documentation, right? So the big miss for me was I didn't think about who like the actor was in that exercise. And I just assumed that they would understand that there's value in this and they would just show up and do it. So I'm curious, Matthew, if you have any thoughts about kind of ways of kind of bringing in those stakeholders, or kind of managing or leading those conversations so that it goes from, we agree that documentation or quality or whatever the thing is, we agree that that's meaningful. How do we build out the processes or tooling around it?
Yeah, I guess the first thing we always kind of do is try and find a friendly team who has a problem that we can help them solve. So one problem that kind of our central analytics team had is they had loads of different data sets, and it was really hard for them to deprecate stuff because they would have so many consumers from across the organization, and they didn't have visibility on who was using it. So when we were publishing kind of a decentralized access framework, so we wanted to force all teams to manage their own access to stuff, which teams don't want to do because right now we did it for them.
Sure.
We started with the friendly teams who were like, yes, we really, really want to control access. We're so excited about that, which there's not going to be that many of, but there's probably going to be one in your organization who gets excited about that. So we got them on board, did a lot of testing, and then it's kind of just a strangle pattern. It's like you have to make it harder and harder to not follow the rules. I think if you kind of beg people forever, they're never going to do it, but you can make it harder for them to not follow the rules. We can process tickets a bit slower, or we can like push them and say, okay, we're not, and finally we're not doing it anymore from January 1st this year. We're just saying we're not processing the tickets anymore. If a team hasn't onboarded, you can't have access. Go chase them. Don't bother us anymore. So you kind of have to, and that took like a year to do. But you kind of have to have a strangle pattern where you make their lives more difficult until they do it. And then usually when teams on board, they're pretty happy with it, actually.
Yeah. I mean, because really you're changing, you're breaking habits and kind of changing or shaping a culture a little bit, right? And I've never heard of it as a strangle pattern, but I understand kind of the sentiment behind it, where it's like, look, this isn't an option anymore. Like these are the rules of the road, and it's because we all agree that the following the principled approach is more valuable than kind of a haphazard way of navigating all of that. Excuse me, Nedra, I'm curious, kind of as you were kind of getting over those or getting past those quick wins with Lineage, what were some of the challenges that you all saw?
I think our largest challenge with regards to like stakeholders or people who want to access DataHub was the fact that they just didn't understand the power of metadata. Some teams I would approach multiple times, try to do a roadshow, try to get them to see. They check out DataHub and they're like, I don't know how I would use this. Then I will be in some meeting with them. They'll have some specific use case. I'll be like, hey, we can give you that information via DataHub. And then all of a sudden, it's like a light goes off for them. And it's like the best thing ever, right? They're like, I can have hours off my life just by accessing this information in a centralized way. And I just wanted to add kind of a little bit to Matthew's comment. One of the things that we're really focused on at Slack is, especially in data engineering, is a concept called toil, right? So our goal is not just to implement DataHub to gate things, but also to decrease the toil across the org. So one of the things we're looking at is like proactive notifications. So if something goes wrong upstream, you can automatically be notified downstream. So there are ways that we're trying to utilize this data differently than just collecting it as a catalog. Went off a little off topic there, but anyways.
No, that's great. Yeah.
So it's really getting people to see the power of it. And once they can add their use case. So it wasn't always just, I guess, about using the UI. It was about using that data in multiple different ways based on what the needs were for that particular team.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have any, and I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but for use cases outside of the DataHub UI, what were some of the kind of points of integration that really stood out, and who were the teams or kind of the personas that were excited by it?
I guess one of the major ones is all of our organizational executive reporting is now driven by DataHub, so that we can see organizationally as how are we doing? What's our data quality level? What's our on-time performance level? What's our whatever indicators that we have decided to then use that. And then we use those metrics to then drive our initiatives to increase those metrics. So one thing we're putting in this quarter is the data quality score, which is loosely based off the Airbnb model. And the data quality score will be used to then say, like, I don't know, our data quality score is 20. Like, then we'll use that to drive our different goals and roadmap for the following quarters. So like we want to get to 50, and then we set our initiatives accordingly. So it's a really great mechanism for us to like quantify in a data-driven manner how data engineering is doing. And the execs seem pretty happy.
Awesome. That's very cool. And Harvey, what about you? What challenges have you seen at Grab? What were some of the hurdles that you had to jump over that you hadn't anticipated?
Yeah, I think one thing that popped into my mind is about search, because we actually spent quite some time to tackle this problem. So our goal is actually to make our data catalog the Google for data within the company. And to achieve that, we need to excel at search. So until recently, our catalog was more of a reference tool. By that, I mean users who already know what data set they are looking for can search for it and easily find all the relevant information. And these are what we call the high intent users. They come in knowing exactly what they need. However, there's another group of users who know their use case, but sometimes they don't know the exact keywords to search for. And they often feel puzzled or overwhelmed by the search results that we present basically on the result page. And these are our low intent users. So our challenge is actually to go beyond being a reference tool and offer an experience where the most suitable and contextually relevant search results are delivered to our data user. So given how data-driven the company is, so solving this search problem is pretty essential for us.
It is, and we see that a lot in the DataHub community where, once you've integrated or once you've ingested information from, 10, 15, 30 platforms, and you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of data assets, figuring out how to bubble up the right and kind of meaningful search results is a difficult challenge, right? Like it is super, because what's meaningful to an analytics engineer may be totally irrelevant to someone who's just, looking for like revenue reporting for, the last quarter or whatever. So it's been really cool to kind of see how folks in the DataHub community are able to customize a lot of those experiences, kind of build out those kind of search ranking signals, et cetera. Also, I'm just taking a step back and realizing like the variety of challenges that everybody's faced, like, they're all very real challenges. And I think it just lends to the fact that there's not like a one size fits all solution for an organization in this space, right? Like it really comes down to organizational systems or practices, use cases, growth stage, team size, all of those fun things. So super interesting stuff there. All right, I'm going to round it out with kind of one final question. If you had to start all over again, you're on day one of your metadata journey, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? And what advice would you give to someone who's kind of early on in their experience? Harvey, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, sure. So I guess for those that just starting out or feeling stuck, my advice is actually to view metadata management as an evergreen problem, not an overwhelming challenge. So 5 years when we started, I believe we actually make the best choice based on the technologies available at that time. And it's great that DataHub was actually open source back then. But 5 years ago, few could actually have predicted the transformative impact generative AI could have on everything we do. So since last year, we've been able to unlock tons of features with Gen AI, right? Automatic generation of table documentation and column description, semantic search, tons of other stuff as well. So if you're just starting out, just identify the key use cases that matter most to your organization and start small and iterate. Celebrate those small wins, sometimes quick wins, build that momentum, and then slowly scale the platform up over time. So yeah, these are the advice I'll share.
It's good advice. Is there anything that you would have done differently?
I would say that I wouldn't probably change anything major, right? So, but that being said, if I could change one thing, it would be to adopt a shift left approach earlier. Because we later recognize the importance of placing ownership closer to where the data is created. And the same applies for other things like data contracts as well, since we are recently actually also launching data contracts within the organization as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, shift left, I believe, is a great approach because it allows us to keep, for example, the documentation ownership up to date because they are staying so close to where the data or the data pipeline is.
Absolutely. Matthew, what did you like looking back? What would you do differently? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think kind of two main things for us is one of them is shifting left earlier. I think we were pretty good at shifting left for DBT, so for analytical pipelines, we did that really quickly, but we weren't so good at shifting left for ingestions, so data before it arrives in our data warehouse.
Sure.
We weren't very good at that. So we actually kind of re-architected our entire ingestion framework to make that work better, in that we kind of changed from a pull-based approach, whereas before we were going and picking up data wherever it was, to a push-based approach. and we wouldn't let people push data to our platform unless it was documented, in our case
Wow.
with a protobuf schema. So you have to give us all the metadata up front, otherwise you can't put the data in our platform. And I think it took us a while to get to the point where we were mature enough to do that, but we've just kind of gotten to that point now, which has made a really huge difference. It also kind of prevents people from making breaking changes because we don't allow them. You can't make a breaking change.
Yeah.
So you have to go through, you can't do it accidentally, at least. You have to kind of have a conversation with all your consumers to do it. So we would do that sooner, I think, although it took like a lot of work. There was like a team of 8 or 9 of us working for a year to do it, to build all the tools for it. But we gave people a lot in return for it. So we let them do kind of streaming calculations instead of doing it in batch if they had a schema. We kind of automatically deduplicated stuff for them if they had a schema. We'd automatically ingest it into different destinations. So we gave them a lot in return and tried to make it exciting, being like, you can use this new tool. And it has all these like extra things that you didn't have before, but you have to put in a little bit of work up front to make so you can use it. And then kind of the other one that we did was you need a champion. Like we had someone, Fabiana was our data governance manager, and she was awesome. She was so enthusiastic. She'd make it fun. She brought in snacks. She'd offer in like sit down and have a meeting with someone, say, I will watch you document this. Like you need someone who is like going to bring stickers. Engineers love stickers. It's like children.
It's so true.
Right? You need someone who's going to make it fun because it can be a chore. You have to make it exciting, but it also can be a chore, and it's important. So you need someone to make it a bit fun.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I find myself saying a lot is, at the end of the day, when you're in this role, when you're kind of like managing a service like this, ultimately you're asking people to do more work, right? You're asking them to meet a standard that maybe they hadn't thought about, or maybe they really don't understand the value behind it, or they don't have the context behind it. And again, this just goes back to like just sitting in a room somewhere and just like defining these standards and assuming that people are going to get it just isn't it. And sometimes it's stickers, sometimes it's office hours, sometimes it's cupcakes. Sometimes it's just like shout outs, but then other times you're able to like give them that through line of, because you did this, here's the value of it. And that aha moment is really, really beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing for the value of it that I think helped for us is changing kind of the question from, compliance made me write a bunch of boring documentation to like, I delivered a data product for the company. And you can put that on your performance review if you're an engineer. Like you can say, like, I did this thing, it provided a lot of value, and kind of changing the perspective from that to, I have to write some documentation because audit told me I had to is a really big difference.
Yeah. Nedra, any big learnings for you or advice you give to someone early in their journey?
I think Harvey and Matthew have covered a lot of the similar points of getting a champion. I am that champion. And
maybe the learning is be your own champion.
I guess just don't give up, right? Like I mentioned, developers will see something a few times and they're like, sure, that's nice. And they just, it's useful to them at the moment, but that doesn't mean it's not useful forever, right? Like maybe there's some piece of toil that we can automate just by leveraging metadata. Is there something we can do? So really focusing on the individual use cases was also a huge priority for us. So we weren't necessarily focused on the technical implementation. We did start with the shift left philosophy from the very beginning. And I'm very glad that we made that effort. But it just takes a while, I think, for people to understand and for it to be useful to more people. Like the more data sets we bring in, the more information we bring in, it just exponentially increases the value for more people, right? So originally it was just for data engineers. Now it's data engineers and data science. And then it's going to be data science, data engineering and product, right? And then stakeholders. And eventually we'll get to the point where even though these disparate use cases seem wildly incompatible in a way, they really are all, in my mind, focused on this same set of data. It's just how you view it, right? What is your need for it? So that's really what my goal is, to not only build out that coverage and the comprehensiveness, but then make it so that we can use it to drive things, right? That makes people, because I'm the laziest developer in the world. If I have to do things twice, I don't want to do it at all. So it's a little bit selfish on my part. Like, I don't want to have to back why this job failed. I don't want to, I want to understand stuff. That's crap. So now, like, this is really, I don't know that I would change anything because this has solved so many problems for us. Even if we didn't necessarily get there to where we are now in an optimal way, I think Tarvi was saying it's like each incremental progress has brought a huge gain. And I felt like that is exactly how it has been for us at Slack as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, folks, thank you all so much for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. Like I said, you're extremely valued members of our data community. And I know that a bunch of folks will really eat up the guidance and kind of helping set the strategies and think through their own DataHub journey or metadata management journey in general. So thank you all so much for your time. And we will see you all in Slack.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
It's great to see you.